Your characters are so different than what we on this planet portray, how we portray older adults and their role and in society and how we value them. And so your characters are much different.
Yeah, I very purposefully wanted the characters to not all be in their 20s or 30s. So they range anywhere from teenagers up through hundreds. Their lifespans on certain planets are just a lot longer. And the reason being, and I can give you an example, I got tired of reading books that showed older people as frail and cranky and crotchety. There was one book that Amazon recommended that I would like, so I read it. It was a romantic comedy, and it's a woman in her early 30s, but they're making this joke. She goes on a cruise and she ended a relationship, and so she ends up sitting at a table with a man who's 50 years old. And the recurring joke is, oh, well, if she doesn't find someone soon, she's going to end up with this old man. So my first thought was, maybe Amazon did not know their audience very well if they suggested it to me, or what our perceptions were of older people. And second, at 49 years old, 50 didn't strike me as terribly old for a 30-something-year-old.
No, next year you can be a member of AARP. That used to be a badge of oldness, but it is not anymore.
So I really wanted in the data collectors for the characters to be doing interesting stuff in their 40s, in their 70s, in their 80s, and really try to be mindful of that. And also, even in the classroom, when they're at TARA, the Terrestrial Academy of Research and Awareness, they don't just have teenagers, they have 50, 60 and plus coming back for education and starting new careers. And that was very purposeful. And I can thank Masterpiece for its years of influence that got me thinking about that.
There are many things in this book that I'd like to see brought to reality here on this planet in order to save not only our planet, but to save our society and work towards a healthy longevity. Well, you and I just finished, we do lots of content. We write lots of content for Masterpiece. We have a huge amount that you and I have had such a pleasure writing, and the whole team writes. And we just finished a program, an intergenerational program that was focused on women and their evolving role in society. I see some of that in this story in the Data Collectors Trilogy.
I tried to, it is heavily focused on women's roles because I happen to be a woman, but I did try to pay attention to the men as well. And what I tried to do is in many of the roles, if it were typically a young male filling the role, I would fill it with an older woman. Or so, for example, Commander Royce is very old, and yet she's a soldier. And she's little, and nobody questions her authority. You have Dr. Willa is a female, well-respected doctor. You have Renanette, who's the director of the Makerspace, which is women in technology you don't hear as much about, and she's the director. I made Palomar and Mallory. They own a costume shop. They're men. I had a male nurse, and I didn't do it in every single case. What I was seeking to do was normalize the fact that we don't have to fit into those stereotypes. Women are the teachers and the nurses, men are the doctors and the scientists, that there is much overlap, and there should be.
There absolutely should be. Now we're talking about themes here, but what you just referred to, your characterization, it is incredible. It is the depth of your characterization, your character portrayal, and the number of characters. I don't know. You must have a big board somewhere. You can't keep this all straight in your head, right?
Well, if you look at the print version of the book, there actually is a list of the characters in each one. And if I'm being honest, by the time I got to book 3 and I started describing the eye color of a character, sometimes I had to go reference it myself. Like, did I give them gray eyes or blue eyes?
Yeah. And with the audiobook, what was that accent they spoke with? Because you did the females for the audio.
So I purposefully did not want... I wanted, when you listen to the audio, to be able to tell the distinct character voices. So I can hear them in my head when I'm typing, but they didn't translate when I started working on audio. So I had the opportunity to co-narrate with Graham Mack, who's a producer and audiobook narrator and broadcaster. So he did all the male voices. And he has a lot more experience doing those different character voices. So for me, I added accents, but I didn't want them to necessarily be distinctly French or German or, Caribbean. I gave elements of it just to identify the different characters, because they're aliens, they can be from anywhere. So I did download some accent help for actors and tried to go through a few courses just so that I would work on how I'd position my mouth, how I'd position where I was coming from in the throat. Is it high in the mouth or deep in the chest? And so I had a lot of fun with them. They were difficult, but
I've written fiction with some characters, and your identification with the characters must have been so enriched by that.
They have a mind of their own. In fact, in one point in our first interview that Graham had interviewed me, and he said, Ivan started pronouncing things wrong. He said, it wasn't me, the character got it wrong, because you get so immersed in the characters that the voice changes. There were some characters that came out without me, wanting them to. Like, I have Kiki, and he kind of talks like this the whole time. And I find myself making these movements as I'm talking about her, or there was Amy, who we hate. You'll discover her in the third book.
It's Amy.
I opened my mouth and she came out and she sounded like this. And I was like, all right, that's her voice. So some of them just happened on their own. Some were very purposeful. But yes, it was interesting to get into those roles, the closest I've ever gotten to method acting, I guess. So when we're talking about strong female characters, Moksha comes to mind. Now, she's a peace-loving assassin, which doesn't seem to go hand in hand. And there's a scene where she's teaching Lucine how to fight and defend herself. And so I actually have a fight scene in there. Now, I come from a background, I studied martial arts for about a decade back in the day, and I wanted this to be accurate as I was writing it. So I'm kind of thinking through the choreography. So my poor husband, I said, could you help me block this out? And he had this look of fear on his face. I said, don't worry, honey. I promise I won't hurt you. So my long-suffering husband, actually in the living room, let me block out the fight scene with him to make sure that the movement made sense when I wrote it.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you used some words, block out. No, but what else did you use? My long-suffering husband. Hopefully he wasn't, that you didn't do something.
I didn't hurt him once.
Great story. And that's let's hear it for John. What a supportive spouse you have there. And so it's fitting that there be a story, or that in some ways he's in this book. Oh,
he's in the book more than that. He's Ivan.
Ivan. Oh, that's a good name. That's a good character.
So, the only person who got that was John's dad. He was reading, he's like, oh, Ivan's John. So he is a character of John, the tinkerer. And my husband's very much the inventor. And he's much more likely to go to a party, and instead of bringing a bottle of wine or flowers, he would bring some bit of technology to put a tracker in your phone. Like, that is just something he would do. So he's romantic in the non-classical sense. I'm actually curious, Roger, do you have a favorite character?
Well, you got to go with Lucine for me, because, to see, here's a woman, and she was born with certain powers, but she develops them, as you say. And she is such an important, I think the novel really revolves around her because of her central role in what everyone wants, to preserve Earth or to grab Earth. And so, yeah, she's the one for me.
And you know what? And she's a perfect example of environment. What do we talk about with Masterpiece? How she's in the wrong environment, and she's working, basically in a minimum wage job in New York, afraid to go anywhere because she doesn't know what's, she feels like somebody's out to get her, but she doesn't know who. To, meeting her friend Fatima, to meeting Cepheus and Ivan, and connecting with Tanager, and all of a sudden a different environment, see how she grows and blossoms as a person. So another theme that I didn't even think about as we're talking about it with Masterpiece.
Absolutely. And we have our null people on Earth. Obviously by the name, they're not the good ones in this story. And but we have those who are so negative about our world, how we treat each other. I mean, it was clear the references there that we can do better than to have the nulls tell the whole story or rule the roost. So is absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, I have a friend who is an astronaut, and when he looked down on the Earth, he said he was forever changed. And I think if you read these stories, you will be forever changed on how you view our Earth, how we treat each other. Uh, you'll see science fiction in an entirely different role.